Well, it is a war. A lot of people don't like using that term, but it is. It's a battle every day that men and women are out fighting. Just not only DEA, but like I said, all of our partners, federal, state, and local partners. It is a war, and we need to continue to put pressure on these cartels. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of society do we want?
Welcome to the OpEdge, the Gazette's opinion podcast, where we bring you cutting-edge perspectives from Colorado's top newsmakers, columnists, and more. I'm pleased to take a deep dive into the fight against fentanyl with Miguel Chino, Assistant Special Agent in charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration's Rocky Mountain Field Division. Miguel, welcome to the OpEdge.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Most Coloradans are familiar with, just the tragedy that is fentanyl and the scourge it is on our state. But do you mind painting the picture for us as to why our state is a corridor for what I believe the DEA has called fentanyl pill superhighways? And how does that affect law enforcement's fight?
I appreciate the question, and I'm glad that Coloradans are aware of this problem. That's one of our big focuses, is to get this information out because people are dying, and we want to stop this scourge of fentanyl. The reason we call these superhighways, these fentanyl highways, because you have I-25 and I-70, which are huge corridor freeways where Mexican cartels, drug traffickers, are transporting large amounts of fentanyl pills or fentanyl powder that's coming into Colorado and coming into the Denver metro area also.
The Colorado contingent of the DEA, can you break down what role the agency plays in the federal government's efforts, considering we are located so far away from the border, where drugs like fentanyl are being smuggled?
In Colorado, we do have a big contingent. We have 45 plus agents, plus over 30 task force officers who are deputized state and local police officers that join the fight against fentanyl with us. And so we are far from the border, but like I said, you do have those corridors. You'll have Mexican cartels that will drive up I-15, then they'll take I-70 over into Colorado, or they'll take the I-25 up north and bring fentanyl pills to our community. And that's what our goal is. The goal is total elimination of fentanyl from the streets of Colorado, from the streets of the United States. That's why we have the campaign right now. It's called Fentanyl Free America, where our goal is total elimination of fentanyl. And everybody joining on this fight is beneficial to what we're doing. And that's what law enforcement is doing. Yeah, we are far from the border, but the Mexican cartels, the Jalisco cartel, which is the CJNG, and the Sinaloa cartel are alive and well in the state of Colorado. The cartels have put people there, and they are distributing fentanyl so they can make money. And so that's why, even though it's far from the border, it's not always stopped at the border. There's very many ways that fentanyl is smuggled in, whether it's the pills or the powder, smuggled into the United States, and then it just webs out and it goes different places. And so that's why we have a big contingent in Colorado, and all our offices there. We have an office in Fort Collins, we have an office in Grand Junction, an office in Colorado Springs, and our main office, and it's actually the office the headquarters for the Rocky Mountain Field Division, which consists of Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Montana. And so we have all those offices there with agents, also task force officers, intelligence analysts, and we have all those people working in conjunction. And then a big part of what we do is we work with our federal, state, and local partners too against this fight. And so everybody has a part in this in law enforcement. And like I said, that is our goal, is total elimination of fentanyl. And we do that with many ways. We can talk about enforcement right now. The big way is we seize the fentanyl, we take it off the street, we arrest the people that have it, we work complex conspiracies of people that are trying to get fentanyl into Colorado and sell it. And so we work all different levels, from the street dealer to the people that are bringing it in, from the cartel in Mexico, and that's what we're doing is eliminating fentanyl from the streets of the United States, and Colorado is what our area right here is.
Yeah, quoting from our recent editorial, referencing the work that you guys have done, and just a recent, operation that you guys had a press conference on. Quoting from the editorial, nearly 3.2 million illicit fentanyl pills and 92.5 kilograms of fentanyl powder were seized across Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Montana between early 2026 and last week. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal, and what is seized amounts to millions of potentially fatal doses. Bringing it now to more boots on the ground, just the destruction that it causes. People are familiar with it, but would you mind just sharing the kind of effects in terms of families, individuals, and homelessness that fentanyl is causing? Just describe some of those scenes and what it ultimately manifests into.
I think sometimes it's hard for all of us to see the devastation unless you have a family member or friend. But one thing with my job that I see is I go around and talk to families who have lost loved ones to the fentanyl poisoning. For example, in the state of Utah, I was at the Walk for Lives that we partnered up with a group to walk in remembrance of those who have died from fentanyl poisoning and to bring awareness of fentanyl. The night before of that event, a family showed up. It was a family, their mother had died the night before from fentanyl poisoning. She was going to be involved in the Walk for Lives. She was fighting the addiction of fentanyl, fighting it. And then that night before, she took a fentanyl pill and it took her life, which is just devastating. And so the son was there. We spoke with him. We spoke to the other family members. He addressed the people there. But it's taking people, and we're losing Americans based on this poison because fentanyl, it's not regulated. Mexican cartels are mixing this powder up, making it into pills, or shipping the powder up to the United States, and then people take it. They don't know how much they're taking it. Right now, what they're telling us is the DEA labs are telling us 2 or 3 out of 10 pills are possibly lethal, compared to 7 out of 10 pills before were possibly lethal. But the problem with that, now people might take 2 pills at a time rather than 1, and there's just no control over it. You don't have a federal regulatory arm that's looking at how that's controlled. It's made by Mexican cartels. The people that are mixing it up aren't scientists. They don't do a quality control check. And so people are taking that, and they are taking too much, or the pill that they take has too much in it. They just don't know, and that's why it's taking lives. And that's why we always go back to the same thing, and that's why we want to get the word out, and we appreciate the time with you today, that one pill will kill. And so unless it was prescribed by a doctor and you picked it up from a pharmacy, you shouldn't take any medication into your mouth like that. The other thing is these fentanyl pills, they look like blue M30 pills. They're counterfeit oxycodone pills, but the problem with that, the Mexican cartels also lace other types of drugs with fentanyl, and that's taking Americans' lives too.
Speaking of which, I think for a few years now, the word's gotten out. There's been good education with regards to, if you're taking other recreational drugs, of course illegal, but if you are, there's a risk of ingesting fentanyl with the nature of how the drugs are being mixed illegally, as you described. On that note, though, I would imagine, just kind of thinking out loud as an everyday Coloradan, that with that education, maybe we have made strides in that sense of reducing accidental overdoses. As opposed to what I think is the second element of what people are aware is the problem with fentanyl is homelessness and the amount of abuse of fentanyl in terms of the vagrancy we see on our streets. So the question to you, I guess, is have we made strides, one, in terms of accidental overdoses with that kind of education? Tell me yes or no on that and expound on that. And two, I would imagine it'd be harder to fix the vagrancy problem, just considering the addiction and how many of the people who sadly are living on our streets, are looking specifically for that substance. So maybe compare and contrast the difficulty of the nature of those two fights. So yeah, just thoughts on the education efforts in terms of overdoses, and how does it compare to trying to help those on the streets who are looking specifically for the substance?
Yes, I think we've made strides on the education side of it, but there's still a lot of work to do. And that's why Fentanyl Free America, it's just not enforcement. We are the Drug Enforcement Administration, but along that enforcement piece, we also have an education piece. And so that's why we're going into schools. That's why we joined this podcast. That's why we were out at the Denver Night Out that took place on Tuesday night. So we can educate people more of the dangers of fentanyl, the dangers of taking a pill that doesn't come from a doctor, all those things. And so there's still a lot of work to do. I think some of the things that, Narcan has been a big help, I believe, also against this fight. But there's a lot of tools that we need to continue to use. Education is a big part of that. Meeting with strategic partners is another big part of that too. So community leaders, those types of people, DEA meets with those as part of Fentanyl Free America, so we can continue the education piece. Because the problem is, like, we as enforcement agency, we arrest a lot of people, we seize a lot of drugs, but we also need to have that part of it also as the education piece. We need to stop the demand. We got to get the demand stopped, and that's all the pieces of Fentanyl Free America: education, strategic partners, and enforcement. All those things together is what we're trying to do. As far as the homeless thing, I've lived in a lot of cities and have seen the homeless problem. I don't know if I could speak enough on Colorado's problem to know what it is, but it's something that we all need to get together and fix that problem for sure.
You mentioned the demand. Speaking of it, would you mind just laying out and explaining to everyday Coloradans the nature of kind of that supply chain, and just the tree all the way from China to Mexico? And I think what many Coloradans are curious about, they're aware of China and Mexico's role in this, but on our side of the border, are there local criminal elements, and how would you describe their role in that supply chain? And then just last part of that question, is it more than just the Mexican cartels, or are there other foreign criminal elements and gangs that are also a part of flooding our state with this lethal drug?
Well, everybody wants to take a piece of this, the drug trade, because there is so much money in it. If you think about it, one fentanyl pill costs the cartel about 1 to 2 cents to produce. Well, in Colorado right now, it's about $1 a pill, $1 to $5 a pill, depends. So if you look at the markup on that, it's huge, and so everybody wants to take a piece of that. If you look at some of our outlying areas outside on the reservations, some of these pills might go for $60 to $120. So the markup's huge, and so you have that. So a lot of people, a lot of different organizations do want to take part of this, but plain and simple, where this comes from is Chinese organizations, companies produce the chemicals. They're precursor chemicals that are sent to Mexico. Mexico then takes those, makes them into fentanyl powder, and that powder's shipped across the border to the United States, where it can be pressed into pills there, or they do press the pills in Mexico and then ship those across though too. So there's a huge market up on that. But plain and simple, that's how it is. The Mexican cartels, they're always looking at how to adapt and make money, and that they don't care about any of our lives. They just care about making money, and so that's what they do. If you look at the 90s in the state of Utah, for example, I'm sure in Colorado also, there was mom and pop meth stores, not stores, not the right word, but meth operations right in the homes. So DEA was really busy in the late 90s, early 2000 of shutting those down. Well, the Mexican cartels grabbed a hold of that, and what they started doing is making super labs, where they produced methamphetamine, and then now we have a methamphetamine problem also, that they're shipping hundreds of pounds of methamphetamine into the United States from these super labs, put these smaller shops out of business. Well, that's how fentanyl is. Back we had an opioid crisis. We continue to have an opioid crisis. Oxycodone was part of that opioid crisis. The Mexican cartels saw an opening of that, so they started flooding the markets with black tar heroin, which heroin is grown, and so it has a growing cycle. So then we moved to fentanyl, because fentanyl is not grown, it's from chemicals. They mix the chemicals together and pill it up or send powder to the United States, where it's pressed into pills here. And so That's the supply chain. And so that's why DEA is targeting Mexico, the cartels there, China, here in the United States. It's all, and I think your question's good, the up down from what the supply chain is, but we're attacking all sides of that, working with our federal, state, and local partners to attack all sides of this problem.
You mentioned money, and obviously greed is something that has motivated criminals for centuries, if not thousands of years, just the history of humanity. Would you mind just elaborating on, does it really just come down to that for the cartels and those involved in this, just the money being a motivating factor? And on that note, is there anything from just a strategic standpoint as law enforcement or maybe policy that can be done or introduced to provide a disincentive and a stronger consequence or just deterrent for these criminal elements to make it so that the money isn't worth it?
It's all about the dollar. The Mexican cartels, it's all about money. They don't care if they lose a few people along the way, a lot of people actually along the way, through fentanyl poisoning, because they want to addict America and continue to get that money. And so if you look at earlier with the black tar heroin problem, they were sending members of the cartel to methadone clinics to give out samples to addict the people. That's why the cartel also laces other drugs and other things with fentanyl, because they want to addict Americans so that they make more money. It's all about the dollar. And so that's why, President Trump, for example, he made fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. With that, it helps the fight. It's another tool in the tool shed. That's why, in the toolbox, that's why President Trump, through executive order, called these cartels, more than the two cartels we're talking about, CJ&G and Sinaloa, but he made all these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And so that's another tool that law enforcement, the military, and other people can use to fix this problem. So as far as, disincentives and anything like that, it's all about money. And so it's all about enforcement, arresting people, taking them out, indicting Mexican cartel members that are in Mexico, and rooting that problem out. And so that's what we're trying to do.
You mentioned policies and just strategies that have been introduced at the federal level. I know you obviously work for a federal agency. To your knowledge, Colorado and the Rocky Mountain region, is there anything just at the more local or state level that's been introduced that has helped with this fight? Or are there kind of policies that maybe hurt with it in terms of not enabling the federal government to do its job? Is there anything you could speak to just more acutely to the Centennial State?
As far as Colorado, it's hard for me to speak on Colorado. An example in Utah, I don't know if this would be interesting to your listeners, but example in Utah, Governor Cox has the fentanyl overdose task force that he's put together. So I sit on that task force along with other local, state, and federal police leaders, also community leaders, also the medical examiner's office, all those types of organizations. We meet together quarterly to find out what we all can do to work together, because as I said earlier, it's a holistic approach to how we're going to fight this. Education, enforcement, strategic partners. So that's an example that we do, and we all have discussions, just not quarterly we're meeting, we're talking throughout the quarter, also trying to find out what we're seeing. And so we see an overdose death, we find out how that came about, what we need to do, were there other drugs mixed besides fentanyl. And so that's one thing that we are trying to do in the state of Utah.
You touched on earlier how it seems as if, based on testing, or maybe it's factually true, that the lethality of individual pills has decreased, although, as you said, that sometimes just means that addicts consume more pills and kind of some of the same results in terms of the tragedy of death and overdose. That being said, that's one kind of new development. What other new developments in this fentanyl issue would you care to share with Coloradans? What should they know are some of kind of the most recent developments, and whether it's breaking news or just trends you're seeing or questions that you guys are starting to ask that is of interest and important?
Thanks. I think there's some positive and negatives. The positive is a decrease from 7 out of 10 pills being lethal to 2 or 3 out of 10 pills lethal is a positive move. And I believe that's all due to enforcement for the most part. A strop decline like that has to be enforcement here in the state, here in the United States, also in Mexico and other places. I think that that's a very positive news for all of us, that's happened. And the other positive news in the United States is overdose deaths are down. They're down in the United States. 2023, you had 120,000 Americans, each individual died of an overdose. We're about 70,000 now. One death is way too many. So, 70,000, one death is way too many, but they are coming down. The problem that we're seeing in Colorado right now is that overdose deaths are up. They're actually up 10%. And so we need to continue to work together to find out why those overdose deaths are up. What's going on there? And so there is positive news, but that negative news is that the overdose deaths are up, and we all do need to work together to find the solution.
Are there any ideas or leads or just thoughts, hypotheses as to why that may be occurring specifically in our state?
I don't know. We still continue to have high numbers of fentanyl pills that are being seized in Colorado. I don't know if there's just more on the street, what's going on with that, but we are working with leaders in cities and state government there to find out what's going on and how we can help out. We'll continue to enforce the controlled substance law. DEA is a one-mission agency. We're responsible for enforcing Title 21, which is the Controlled Substance Act, and so we'll continue to do our part with enforcement. We have men and women out all day, all night, finding out what they can do to take fentanyl off the street, and we'll continue to do that, and then continue to meet with leaders in cities and in the state of Colorado and those places.
What's specific to the fentanyl fight is not known well enough amongst our populace, and along with that, what is the media missing that is worthy of our attention?
I think the media has been good and given us good coverage of what we're doing. One thing with DEA that we're trying to do is get the word out, get what DEA is doing out so people know that it is a problem. I think a lot of times we don't want people to know because we don't want to know that the bad things are out there. But the Mexican cartels, CJ&G cartel, and the Sinaloa cartel are alive and well in the state of Colorado. And so I think we need to continue to let people know that this is a problem. Even if it hasn't affected you, even if you haven't had a loved one die of fentanyl poisoning, it's still happening, and we all need to join this fight to eliminate this. And so we can't have our head in the sand and hope it goes away. We all do need to take part in this to take it away. And so we do appreciate the media putting this word out, and especially, you taking the time for this podcast so we can let people know that there is a problem, and it's a major problem, and we're trying to address it. We're working hard, but we need everybody to work together to eliminate fentanyl and that's what Fentanyl Free America is. That's why DEA is pushing this campaign right now. Fentanyl Free America is to eliminate fentanyl from the streets of the United States. And the other campaign, like I said before, is one pill will kill, but one conversation could save a life. And so families should be talking to family members about taking a pill that doesn't come from a pharmacy. I mean, those are conversations you need to have at the table. Kids go out at night, whatever they do, they need to know. If somebody hands you something, you don't put it in your mouth. That's the last thing that we want, is somebody to die, another person to die from fentanyl poisoning.
Everyday Coloradans watching this may be interested in your thoughts on this. In war and in efforts like this, major, society-wide efforts to try to curb something that's so devastating and so destructive, sometimes it could feel helpless and hopeless, and that no matter what we're doing, it just seems like it's not enough, and we're not seeing any progress. What are your thoughts on that? How does the agency you work for, do things seem positive? Is there a positive trend? And with that, even if it may be positive, does it seem like it's the opposing side, the enemy, frankly, is just unceasing in their efforts? And does it feel like it's a monster that's too big to slay? Sometimes I feel like Coloradans may see what's going on the streets and hear stories and just feel dejected and despair and be like, man, is this even possible?
Well, it is a war. A lot of people don't like using that term, but it is. It's a battle every day that men and women are out fighting. Just not only DEA, but like I said, all of our partners, federal, state, and local partners. It is a war, and we need to continue to put pressure on these cartels. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of society do we want? Do we want a society where fentanyl's running rampant through it, or other drugs or anything like that? That's not what I want. That's not a Colorado I want. I don't want a Colorado like that. And so the thing is, we need to continue to put pressure on the cartels to arrest people, put them in jail, to seize fentanyl, to educate the public, and we are making a difference. I've been doing this for close to 30 years. I've been in law enforcement, and I believe that we are making a difference. And if we take our foot off the gas, we'll just go backwards. And so we will continue to fight. We'll continue to fight at every different level, find different ways that we can be better and improve, and seize more drugs and take it off and take out these cartels. That's our goal.
Miguel Chino, ASAC for the DEA's Rocky Mountain Field Division. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for tuning in to the OpEdge. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like, subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share it with your friends and colleagues. For the Gazette, I'm Antonio Olivero.